Bonjour amigos, welcome, and this is Blitzboy HD. In this video I made about some stories I want to write. I was supposed to devote a section to explain how I grew into writing, along with some mistakes that you can hopefully learn from. The video got too long, so I left that portion out, but here it is now. Note, I will only talk about the stories that I actually want to write. July 2016. The first time I ever wrote anything was after watching a Minecraft series by the renowned YouTuber, Dan here, from the Diamond Minikit. The series was about two friends going back to high school to finally complete graduation. Unfortunately, it only lasted 8 episodes. My 12-year-old self was determined, and I mean, determined, to write it into a book. I've recently read the little beginning that I wrote. In hindsight, here is some general advice. Do not write every single letter in caps, and do not bore your audience into submission by having someone basically recite the entire goddamn schedule because you want the audience to be aware of what is going on at the school. A simple picture is enough and doesn't ruin the pacing. October 2016. Around my 13th birthday, Isel, Mickey Mouse, and myself went to Spur to try making a film. The film began with Isel coming back from hiking, and me rejecting an offer to go with him. We later went to have dinner, and as you can clearly tell, this was just a copy of Tintin in Tibet. In the next scene, Mickey Mouse would dress up as a chef and come take our order. We don't have the videos anymore, but I do remember the cringe being substantial. Here are some tips I can give you. First tip, chefs don't take orders, waiters do. Second tip, when the scene begins, don't stare into the camera's soul before getting into character. Third tip, me correcting the chef when he says coming down instead of coming up is not funny. November 2017. A little more than a year had passed, and we still had that desire to make a film. One day, we decided to stop fooling around and actually start with something, and here's what we came up with. Q. A notorious drug, something, is looking for a smuggler to deliver drugs, somewhere. We only recorded around 10 minutes and then decided it should be a series of 2 episodes. If you're wondering why there are 3 videos, I'll get to that. Even though we only recorded these 2, my brain wasn't settled until I wrote a few more. It was very limited, since we couldn't actually get any other actors, because one of us was too wimpy and the other was too shy. Deck 2017. Just before the year ended, I came across an RPG called Life is Strange. The story follows a teenager using time travel to investigate the mess that is her school. Despite the powers, the teenager's being involved in detective work, and this guy, it was somehow more accurate than whatever the hell is going on in Netflix. I really enjoyed it, despite some amount of cringe. Now, since I was already writing for the series, I figured I might as well try to write a book, inspired by this particular game, but as a prequel to DRUGS. The game was also what inspired me to start writing a journal. Fourth tip, keep a journal. I might make a different video about why you should. Early 2018. 2018 started off in an odd way, but first, a bit of background. While 2017 started off well from an academic perspective, throughout the year my concentration dipped and my scores descended. This is what led me to make a really bold decision. I decided that from 2018 to 2021, I would be the perfect student, so I decided to get a whole bunch of workbooks to keep notes on, some for the year, some for the remainder of high school, one as a journal and one for the aforementioned book. It was a massive failure. But more on that later. For now, just know that we tried to reboot the series, and only made 1 episode. After that we pretty much gave up. Now, back to the book. Due to the influence of the series, the book is a lot more crime-focused than the game. Despite making some progress, it only took about 3 months for me to get scared and stop writing it. However, I still wrote down something very important. See, in the series, my character was Max, an undercover spy looking to bring down Q. I added his character into the story, but changed his name to Tiger, since Max was already taken. During a lesson, when I got really bored, I wrote down his character biography. 5th tip, even if you don't want to write down the story, at least write down some key events and some key information about the setting and the folks. Late 2018. As the year continued, I basically lost my interest in writing, stopped playing sports, lost my concentration in school and just didn't know where exactly I was headed, but that would change soon. Throughout the year of 2018, I had a resurgent interest in DC, which led me to watch some of my childhood favorite media, along with some new additions. The movie Dawn of Justice basically single-handedly revived my motivation to write. Looking into what happened with the Snyder Cut also made me just hate the Justice League movie. There was also this guy, who rewrote the movie. I recommend checking it out, it's quite cool. In the videos, there's a segment where he talks briefly about film format. This is where I learned it for the first time. 6th tip, when trying to create art of any sort, try seeing if there's any format to it, as that can help greatly. 2018 to 2019. During the year-end holidays, I went to visit my family back in India, but before that, a couple of things. Just before I went, I got myself this little A5 spiral thingy, where I made a couple of drawings. She also accompanied me to the Himalayas and Bandhavgarh and becomes important later. During my time visiting India, I decided to try and adapt a video game that I tried to before. Lego City Undercover. I thought since it was meant for kids, it didn't reach its full potential. By trying to adapt the game, I encountered a slight problem. 3 of my stories now had the same character. What was I to do, but to combine them into a trilogy, even though they had nothing to with each other, and then tell some family members about it, even though it would remain incomplete for years. 7th tip, don't tell anyone about projects you haven't completed. In other words, don't do what I'm doing right now, unless you want some help. April 2019. Even though I jotted down some main events, I didn't write anything as far as the story is concerned. This frustrated me to the point of actually just writing a story out of sheer discontent for myself in our school's little bat cave, where myself, Isel and VK would hang. I wrote a story called Flight of the Birds. This is the second in a 5-part series focused on the bat family. I was also planning to write a film about Green Lantern and the whole Justice League. I didn't write the others, since my attention shifted over to cricket thanks to these tournaments. June 2019. Around the duration of the World Cup, I stumbled onto a TV series called Citizen Khan. I enjoyed it thoroughly and this was the first time I binge-watched an entire series. For some reason, I wanted to make a series of my own. It was so embarrassing that even then, I could tell it was cringe. The show was kind of like a police soap opera set in Seattle. Basically, it would follow the main characters, who embark on their respective storylines, but obviously encounter each other at some point. One of these storylines was the chase storyline, from the aforementioned Lego City Undercover, which I still wanted to adapt. Eventually, or thankfully, whichever one, I dropped the rest of the storylines and focused only on one, the chase story, which I decided to adapt into a series. It was also around this time that a relative of mine gifted me Minecraft, which had just undergone the Village and Pillage update. Early 2020. A little while afterwards, by the beginning of August, I started taking the little notebook to school to make notes for school, draw and write some stories, all in one. This is when I stopped packing a whole freaking library in my bag and just took the notebook, along with some textbooks. During February 2020, I finally got that urge to write again, because I could not for the life of me concentrate in school. I created a little format for the series, which I used to write the first 2 episodes and even created a little side plot and some artwork for the first episode. Also the name Natalia, of the main female lead, became the default girl name in every story since then. Towards the end of February, it was time to retire this notebook and find a successor. Of course I had to write her a letter first. In early March, a new story would be written in the new notebook. This story featured 2 adventurers defending a village from a raid. I didn't know what to name the characters, so I just borrowed Dan and Dr. Trayaurus PhD from the first story I talked about. This story was important, since I completed it all the way until the climax, the first time I have ever done that. I then began a site, where I would write the story in a lot more detail. By the way, I can be a lot more certain about these dates than the previous ones, because I wrote them down at every opportunity. 8th tip, always write dates. Whatever you make, a drawing, a scene, an idea, always write dates. Pan 2020. After having a fantabulous cricket season, during which our team was undefeated, it was time for the year to go downhill. This dude came along and forced everything to shut down, and I'm guessing I wasn't the only one to lose complete track of time. I have no idea in what order any of these events happened, just that they did. Firstly, I continued writing both Project R and Project S on their respective sites, until I just lost my concentration, my willpower, and my Duolingo streak. That being said, one of the most important of these events was a thought experiment with a little island. I won't go into too much detail here. The other thing was that I finally watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy again. This trilogy made me really interested in the fantasy genre and also made me want to write a story incorporating it into Minecraft. Also, this is where I got my intro from.
Welcome, to Keynote Das Bang Bang.
Bonjour amigos, welcome, and this is Blitzboy HD. School did start again, around August. This is when I looked back and realized how little I did, and I'm guessing I'm not the only one. Realizing I didn't actually finish anything just demotivated me and basically just removed any interest I had left. Early 2021. School started somewhat late in 2021, giving me time to again aim ridiculously high, though a little more successful this time round. Around the end of March, there was a little segment where a couple of us were called to act out situations. I acted as Bongani, a character that became the inspiration for a new story. I didn't write it, as I was still in a can't mindset from before. So I just went along and then got really excited about the new MK movie. I read into the lore and was really fascinated by how much effort they put into it.
Impressive.
Since the very beginning. Much more than they did into the movie, sadly. Mid 2021. Between May and July is where things get interesting. By the end of May, I had just encountered the Trojan War saga, my first introduction to Hellenic mythology. This inspired me to finally start writing the project from the previous year, for which I designed a cool map. A short while later, I uploaded a video about my experience with languages, albeit very inaccurate. I then wanted to make one about writing, but wanted to take the time to make it accurate. That's the video you're seeing right now. The video would gloss over some of my earlier projects and tease my current ones, because I didn't want to finish some of my earlier ones, which are quite cringe. While brainstorming what my old writings were, I became a bit upset that I didn't do as much as I wanted to. Then, for no reason, even though it was a normal day, my brain tried to convince me that I was depressed.
I am having a very bad day. I am in no mood. Today, is one of the worst days that I've had in a long time. I'm not in the mood to play with anybody. I don't want to talk to you today. I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm ticked off. I mean, this is not funny. It's not funny. I mean, this is a terrible, terrible day. This is the equivalent of being kidnapped, stored in a basement. I mean, you just can't make this up. I'm telling you right now, I got an attitude with everybody. Every damn body. You make me sick. I don't like any of yous. I mean, damn it. You can pretend all you want. You didn't care about me.
As much as I tried to just go about my day, my brain just didn't let me. This changed when I read my first 2 notebooks. I forgot to mention, there was now a 3rd book. Looking back at some of my old writings just gave me a sense of joy that put me at such ease. Such joy, that the very next day, I scripted a scene in class that I wanted to do for 1.5 years. By the last 3rd of June, I had learned how to structure a screenplay, which I'm surprised they never mentioned in school. I then had a little idea. Since most of my projects are just inspired by other stories, I should just have a session of coming up with stuff. So during class, I wrote a fantasy adventure that I read to my mate Isel, who really liked it. I actually heard him utter a character's name in his sleep. This story is also what made me want to build an epic palace in Minecraft. While I was telling him the story, I promised to show him some of my old works. After we walked home in the shower that was Cape Town weather, we read some old projects and notes I had written down, along with some of those workbooks that I used and never used. Most importantly, this happened.
Reading his diary. Journal. Look how focused he is. He can't even hear me. He can't see. Let's see if he'll notice that I'm actually recording it.
Saturday the 17th of February. We went out, and those two, meaning you and Adam, forced me to. What the hell are you recording?
I was so happy that I kept a journal, but a little upset that I went 3 years after failing to keep it up. I instantly wrote a journal entry for the day and have continued on since then. The advantage this time is that I know it's worth it. Finally, around halfway through July, I made a little list about all the projects I wish to flesh out into actual stories, including some that I had written off earlier. Those old notes were really a hell of a game changer. 2 days later, I wrote myself a letter, officially declaring Operation Blitzeracher underway. Late 2021. After adding one more project, I finally decided that instead of just writing them down, I would also share them on YouTube. Now, a couple of new problems arose. Which project do I do first, and how exactly would I share them? The order of the projects wasn't really a problem, apart from the first one. Should I make it the original list, Or should I add in one about the Trojan War? Well, I decided that the one about the Trojan War should be in its own series. Now the style. There were 3 options. I could sit in front of a screen, discussing it. I could take a picture of the page and scroll down without any actual reading. Finally, I could make cartoons summarizing scenes from the stories. The first 2 would take a lot less time, but they wouldn't be very satisfying to me. This is why I've decided to go with the third option, even though I could imagine it would take maybe 10 years for me to go through all the projects. 2023. Over the next year, I revisited the stories, making sure the continuity was alright. 2023 is the year this mission will finally kick off. I hope you're as excited to see it as I am to follow my Dharma.